Hello, good afternoon, everyone, on this very hot and humid July day. I hope you are doing well, and welcome to those who have been following us and been with us for the past five or four webinar sessions. And for those who are new, welcome to the Creative Care webinar series. It is wonderful to see people join us from across different communities and sectors today. And I would like to just allow you to go ahead and find a comfortable position, have some tea, coffee, lunch, and tune in to this conversation. My name is Christen Kong, and I'm a health promoter at Access Alliance Multicultural Health and Community Services, where I really focus on advancing newcomer mental health and wellness through the arts. This is honestly one of my favorite things, which is capacity building and knowledge mobilization so that you can meaningfully shape your everyday practice and community care. So today is exciting because it's our second last session of a six-part series to advance arts integration in healthcare and settlement. The series is funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada, part of the Hubs of Expressive Arts for Life, also known as the HEAL Project, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land in which many of us are gathered here today. Those of us in Toronto are on the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. As an organization serving immigrants and refugees facing systemic barriers, we recognize the ongoing impacts of colonialism on Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and we honor the resilience and resistance of Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. So today's webinar is one of my favorite titles, and it is Messy is Beautiful, Lessons from Facilitator Learning Logs. So if you were with us 2 weeks ago, we invited these same panelists back with us today to share and explore how to support and sustain those who facilitate healing for communities and individuals. Maybe you're on the call today and you are a program implementer and you know the bittersweetness of what implementation means. We're going to be highlighting the importance of culturally responsive facilitation, effective trainings or things to sustain ourselves, compassion-focused practices. You will also hear about different ideas around language and identity and culturally safe approaches. And really, I hope you leave today taking away something that you can implement in your everyday life, even maybe this week. So I am pleased to introduce today's panelists in brief, and you'll get to know them through the discussion today. So first up in our yellow background is Madge. Madge is a psychotherapist and expressive arts facilitator. They are trained in expressive arts therapy and draw from many different trauma-informed somatic practices. They root their work in anti-oppressive and anti-colonial frameworks, and currently they are finishing their master's in interdisciplinary studies at York University, where they research Palestinian migrants' experiences with psychiatric and mental health systems in Canada. So thank you, Madge. Next up in the blue, we have Afsane. Afsane is an interdisciplinary artist, registered as an art therapist and psychotherapist, and a person of diaspora of Iranian Canadian heritage. She is based in Toronto and graduated in fine arts from the University of Manitoba. She continued her studies in art therapy at Toronto Art Therapy Institute, and she has decades of clinical experience working with refugees, newcomers, war, torture, and those who experience trauma. She has also been involved in helping a diverse population of age groups with their mental health for the past 30 years. So thank you, Madge. And finally, we have Victoria in the red background. Victoria is an expressive arts therapist and registered psychotherapist, providing body-centered, trauma-informed care to children, adults, couples, and families. She supports anxiety, emotional regulation, and family transitions, offering services in English and Spanish. Her approach strengthens relationships and fosters resilience, autonomy, and meaningful change. So, as you can see, we have a wealth of knowledge in this space today. So, I'm really excited to get started. Um, to structure our discussion, I will invite our panelists to respond to 3 to 4 guiding questions, and each of them will have a couple minutes to respond, and that will bring us through this 1 hour together. I would really highly recommend those who are joining us today, we have a Q&A feature. So if you have a question throughout the webinar, please pop that in the Q&A. We also have a chat function as well today. And so if you want, more resources or have questions for us as panelists, you can also put comments in the chat box. But I will note that the questions and comments in the chat box will only come to the panelists. And that is housekeeping. So without further ado, I'm going to begin with our first question. So our first question is readiness of facilitators. For those who maybe joined in our other sessions, we talked about readiness of participants. Are they ready to join a group therapy session? But it is just as important to assess the readiness of facilitators around ongoing knowledge and skills and trauma-informed and culturally responsive practice. So how do we measure or assess readiness? So I'm going to pass that to Victoria to start us off with the conversation. Go right
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you. Thank you. I've been thinking about this question for a little while, and I don't know that we're ever ready, and at the same time we're always ready. So it's a little bit of like a twofold. After working as a frontline worker at a VAW shelter, at a women's shelter, working with children and women fleeing interpersonal violence, every day was such a whirlwind, and it required us to be so present that I could the day before or a week before plan and organize what I wanted to do with all the families for the week, but life things happened all the time. And sometimes I'd be in the middle of a session with a client and we had an emergency to take care of at the shelter. So how do we take care of a client at the same time respond to what is happening at the shelter? So, or even when we are brought into a space that we can plan to be half an hour early and have all of our materials, and then the door's locked, and then we're outside with all of the clients or all the participants. Like things happen. And so one of the things what I find that's really magical about expressive arts therapy and the practice that all three of us here are engaged with is that expressive arts therapy really keeps us on our feet. It keeps us in the imagination, in the creative self. It allows us to stay very playful so that we are really malleable and in a way, like I think what I want to say is that not to take anything too seriously in the sense of that at the end of the day, even though that we are facilitators and we are in a leadership role and that we have responsibilities as facilitators, that we're also human and the individuals that we're working with as participants they're also human. So showing up as ourselves, I think is really important. Showing up as prepared as we can be, but knowing that when things turn, which happen all the time, to flow, to be like water, to to stay in our creative selves and to trust that the practice of play therapy and of the imagination serves as a fuel for keeping us ready. So, yeah, it's almost like trusting the field, trusting the work, and trusting ourselves, and also trusting the participants.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for that imagery of the water and the flowing and the flexibility of, that image. And I'm going to pass that on to Afsane.
Um, well, lovely to be back. I think as Victoria said, absolutely, all very true. When we need to be very present, but also, the awareness of the prevalence of trauma. When we practice our craft, we need to uh, learn and know the types of trauma, the signs of trauma, how the nervous system work, and also most importantly, have the not to re-traumatize clients or participants. So the important question is, do I know my what do I have the knowledge? Am I well prepared? Do I what my responses need to be? So all these things are gained by training, by learning, by uh, professional development, from supervision. All these come hand in hand. So because it's the client's interest is at play, and so we need to make sure the safety is there. We need to be able to build the trust and give clients the choices. And like Victoria said, um, they're in charge. They are the experts themselves. So we are there to help them and guide them in their journey.
Yeah, thank you. And just to highlight that last word of journey, you mentioned, right, professional development and training. But as facilitators, we are on our personal journey, and that takes a lot of attention and intention, and time and effort to do that. So thank you. And I'm going to pass it to Maj to kind of share more about that.
Yeah, hi everybody, and good to be back. Um, yeah, I want to kind of follow what Victoria was saying about like not being surprised by what could happen, right, in those spaces. And I guess I'm thinking of facilitators who are just beginning who might have questions around, am I ready, or imposter syndrome. And to that, I would say, like, you just have to do it. You have to be in those spaces. And ideally, there's mentors or people there who've gone through those experiences that you could also learn from. Um, but even if you are experienced, even if you've done this a million times, like Victoria was saying, sometimes the doors lock or something breaks or there's a crisis or, there's no water in the bathroom or whatever, right? Like things happen. And so there is this that there's always a question of being flexible, being able you won't know what to expect, so you just have to kind of be open to not knowing and being open to mistakes and being open to fumbling. And I think that's part of the building trust with yourself is like it's okay if I don't know and I can figure it out and learn and go from there. And then ideally that you have support too. Like I do think situations where there's only one facilitator, those to me are um, not ideal or not supportive environments for any kind of like group sessions, in my opinion. I do think you need more than one person, just again in case things happen, even if they're not co-facilitators, but just other folks in the space. And then in terms of the culturally responsive piece, I was a participant actually one time phrased it as like culturally humble practitioners or facilitators. And I think that's the best way to be culturally responsive or quote unquote culturally sensitive, whatever you want to call it, is to be humble in your and to kind of check yourself of like what you take for granted or what you might not understand or what you might judge. And so I think keeping those things in mind of like even if I do feel ready, I might not be fully ready and be open to that. And also, if I'm not feeling ready, to also just push myself to take that risk, to try to practice, and then to also be humble and in terms of yeah the cultures and the knowledge that's in the space.
That's great. Thank you. And it sounds like, the three of you are actually talking about a posture of readiness that we will never reach, a full point of readiness, but it's a posture, a demeanor coming into a session, thinking about that humbleness piece, the flexibility, the trust within ourselves and our teams. Which kind of leads me to the next question. I mean, I feel like as facilitators and social service providers and communities, we often talk about burnout. But it's often also too late, by the time we notice it. And so the next question really is, what are indicators that maybe you practice in your own life to notice burnout, but also to prevent it from even getting to a stage where we shut down or we are unable to facilitate? So I'm going to pass that to Victoria.
I think, it's interesting thinking about, well, I guess where I want to wrap the question is thinking about the longevity of it, right? And staying curious, staying attentive to the personal growth. And I think the first thing that came to my mind was how, as an individual and as a facilitator, how am I fueling myself? How am I nourishing myself in order to nourish others? And I think in facilitation and expressive arts therapy, this exchange, not only of the facilitators to the participants, but also the participants to us. Like I have endless counts of experiences of feeling so full from what I've learned from other individuals. And so really thinking about, yeah, that self-responsibility. Am I hydrating myself? Am I creating art? Am I allowing myself to have playtime? Am I also in therapy? Am I laughing? If I'm asking my participants to laugh and to play and to draw, am I doing those things on a regular basis? So that's the first thing that comes to my mind, is also just like that image of like, am I filling myself as much as I'm saying I want to fill others in the creative space?
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate you bringing back that relational aspect that, it's not all about us, but we nourish each other. And that exchange, that reciprocity is really at the crux of a lot of the work that we do.
Mm.
I'm gonna, yeah, pass that to Afsani to respond to.
The I think the risk of, I guess, burnout is always, it can be there, in the work we do. And it is the kind of the compassion fatigue we might feel at times that can lead to either burnout or vicarious trauma. So the compassion itself means suffer with in Latin, the meaning of it, which is, as Charles Figley put it, it's the cost of caring. So therefore, in order not to get to a point where we feel burnt out, we really need to listen to our bodies. And as Victoria also said, play and nourish and all the above. But also pay attention, if we are feeling tired, restless, if we maybe have withdrawing from social settings, we want to be alone, drinking too much, maybe substance use, headaches, some somatic symptoms that are just kind of appearing. And so we need to pay a lot of attention to all the and negative thoughts sometimes, not liking to go to work. So these are very important to not to miss. And again, look into caring of ourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Afsane. And I think you bring up a really important piece, which is somatic, our bodies. How are we paying attention to our bodies, not just, preparing ourselves with session plans and knowledge, but doing in a body scan of sorts, and not ignoring those symptoms that show up in our bodies that maybe we cannot articulate. And to that point of play and creation, we also need to be non-verbally engaging in those ways to express ourselves. And so I'm going to pass that to Maj. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as of Sana was talking, I was noticing my own headache. It's like I'm feeling the burnout. I mean, I'm feeling the burnout not in a work setting, more of just family caring setting. And yeah, I think the signs of burnout for me are very similar to like when you experience hunger or when you like haven't just met like basic needs and suddenly you're just a little bit more irritated at any kind of stimuli, any kind of sound, or something is like just a little more irritating than usual. So yeah, that's how I notice it in myself, and I notice it also in others in that ways of just being a bit more reactive, maybe brain fog, difficulty focusing, those kinds of things. But in terms of I mean, it's hard to say around like prevention. Just again because there's so many factors at play. Like burnout can happen also because not just because of the work that we do, but also because of life situations that are outside of that, that are personal, and it could all work together. Um, I think I think for me, it's that uh the ability to like recognize it while like you might again I guess I'm saying that like sometimes we won't be able to notice it before it's actually very obvious, right? Like that it is really hard to clock it sometimes before the physical symptoms start. So that's okay. I think that's okay that that happens. And that once that happens, that we are responsive and that we're not necessarily just like pushing ourselves through it all. And so anything from like, you know, being in water or near water to like eating good food to like really getting some sleep if we are not getting any sleep, you know, like all those things that our bodies need to do. Um, and there was something else that I'm also forgetting. I do also think again that I keep going back to like the relational pieces of like who's around that could like telling our co-facilitators, telling the people around us like, hey, I am exhausted or I am feeling this today and I'm just needing a bit more support around these things, right? Like delegating or sharing so that it's not just carrying it all ourselves. And then I think Victoria mentioned therapy, and I'm always always go to therapy. I think part of the reason I'm also feeling it for me right now is that I haven't had therapy in like 2 months, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm starting to feel the impact of just not having that support. So yeah, I second that.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, facilitators are participants ourselves and reaching out, communicating for that additional support, and noticing and documenting our support systems. Before I move on, Afsani or Victoria, did you want to add anything to this question?
I actually would like to say we just to remember or remind ourselves that we cannot fix everything. It's so important to remind ourselves again, not to get into burnout because as frontline workers who we want to care and be there for everyone, and we have this tendency to fix everything, and it's just not humanly possible.
Yes, yes.
And I would say that I want to say that it's okay to burn out. I mean, it's not okay to burn out, but meaning that when it happens, that it's not a failure on ourselves. That if it happens, we probably, as a society, all noticed burnout way too late. We probably needed to have noticed it like, woo, like a few miles back. So when it happens, it's not to take it so personal. Um, I just remember when my first big burnout, I felt like I had failed. And that is something I've heard throughout the years from other colleagues and participants. And so it's sort of like this happens, unfortunately, and it's for a reason external to us. And we live in a system and we work within a system that is structured in a way that facilitates burnout so that we don't take it so personal. That if it happens, it happens, and instead our energy can go towards the next steps and the recuperation.
Can I add to that a little
Yes,
bit?
please.
Yeah, I just also to connect it back to the compassion fatigue
Yeah.
piece that I was talking about, which is that to recognize that we are absorbing so much, even if we're not like consciously aware of it, and we're carrying so much like the empathy itself, like the energetic exchange with groups and others. And that there's the piece where we're feeling other people's stuff, but it's starting to tangle with our stuff too. And there's just so much happening there that we're like expected to it could go beyond humanness and not have those things, but that takes a toll on us. And just like add to what Victoria is saying, that that's not in any way a failure. It's just nature, right? Like it's just that's what happens when you're a single person or two people holding a whole thing that's also interacting with your stuff, and it's not fully being having the space to breathe or processed, or the ebbing and flowing, because sometimes a lot of these things are like boom 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 and for long periods of time, and that's again not very sustainable. So again, that's not a personal failure at all. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for reframing that burnout, that it reminds us that we're human, that we have limitations. And I think it's also because I worked with all of you, is it's managing those expectations, right? And being really honest about them. What is within our capacity that we can do to serve the communities that we are working with? Which leads me to, right, Madge kind of touched on this, containers, beautiful, like containers that we can hold each other, these support systems. And so the next question is, what types of support systems? We did a lot of debriefing after the sessions. We did a lot of, working with each other in the HEAL project. It was 12 weeks long. That's, 3 months. It's pretty substantial time to be, facilitating with each other. And so, yeah, what types of support systems do you think can support facilitators in program implementation that, retain retention and also maintain sustainable well-being throughout? And I'm going to pass this to Afsane to start us off on this one.
I think, well, one is supervision, extremely important. Debriefing, absolutely. Professional development opportunities, learning constantly. Therapy is very important. And in an organizational level, I'm also wondering, I mean, absolutely not too big of a kind of workload. So the awareness is there that one person can only do so much as a worker. So healthy environment in the organizational level is important. The kind of having the opportunity to have reflective kind of practices through art, dance, through laughter, as Victoria mentioned. So those are the things right now comes to my mind, and I think probably also having an opportunity to have a say in policies, so to be given a voice and be co-creators or having a say. Because as frontline workers, be able to voice what we need.
Right. So communicating back to agencies the changes that we want to see for ourselves. Yes, yes, for sure. I'm going to pass it to Madge to respond to this one.
Yeah, yeah. I think the peer support is absolutely invaluable. Um, the yeah, anytime we got to debrief beforehand or afterwards, that was yeah, like I wouldn't be able to do those workshops without that. I also, as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I don't know, there were like community acupuncture or massages or like like just a time together to just sit around and eat good food just with for the facilitators themselves and not have to like worry about hosting or facilitating or I think if there are resources in organizations and agencies to do that for the facilitators, I think that would be amazing. I'm just allowing myself to to dream of those things. Um, yeah, and then yeah, I do think again, I think I keep going back to I think of relational like human support, and I do think of like nature elemental beyond support of just like being able to feel supported by like the nature, the trees, the what's around us, and I think um even like choosing environments or spaces that allow for that, like spaces where there are gardens or there are trees or there are parks around that you could like go to and sit and just breathe a little bit, you know. I think I think those also make a difference.
You and Marge, yes, dream big. I mean, this is part of why we're having this conversation is sometimes we don't know what we don't know, but we need to allow ourselves to imagine, what these support structures or systems within organizations can look like for facilitators. And that goes also for practitioners, healthcare workers, settlement workers who experience very similar experiences to what we are doing. So yes, as Victoria shares, continue to think. If you have more examples, I will loop back around. So Victoria, to you.
Yeah, I can't emphasize the peer support and the and supervision enough. And the debriefing critical. There's just things come up and in groups that sometimes need a few minds to deconstruct and to unravel, to understand, to process. Yeah, I think in our field that's critical. We're also legally bound by those things, which but outside of the legalities, yeah, there's just we can't do this alone. We need our peers, and we need our supervisors, and we need the team. We need the team to debrief.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Afsane or Marge, would you like to add anything?
I wanted to say how about mandatory self-care in every organization, right? As Madge said, wouldn't be lovely if we had, kind of intentionally, doing or having the space to have self-care opportunities. It's very important. It's a great message for frontline workers that the work they do matters, so that kind of you need to nourish yourself now. It's a mandatory self-care moment. Whether taking breaks or yeah, coming together for meal and potlucks and things like that. Very important.
Yeah, thank you, Sunny. And it brings up a really good point about protecting time, right? Investing them. It's not just a cognitive understanding that self-care is good for us, but we actually have to go as far as to practice it. And we can only practice that when we allow time and space. So instead of, right, clinicians having back-to-back meetings, how are we pausing and having those pauses as part of actually the practice that we have? Something else too for those, managers of projects, putting that in the budget as well. Having supervision as part of the budget for facilitators is so important to also send that message to funders that we need support and investment in creating a safe space for our facilitators. Because I know that when I was observing each one of you, so much of the, beauties and joys of the program was because of who you were as a facilitator. And so we really need to be paying attention to that value, but holding, the value of our facilitators really seriously and intentionally.
Yes, if there's any funders or managers here, definitely allocating resources to create that support is essential. I think it's not necessarily seen as like productive or effective, but it is ultimately it is what we need to be able to do what we do. So yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to pivot to our final question here. For those who are attending, just a reminder, yeah, please put some questions in the chat if you do have, or any curiosities around facilitator wellness or even sustainability. We would love to hear your comments and questions. So for this final one, for the panelists here, I'm going to change it up a bit, but I'll read the original question that we had, which is, what are the most common challenges facilitators face when working with those who have experienced trauma or gender-based violence? I mean, we are faced with many challenges, but I would say, things like debrief, supervision, all of those happen kind of outside of the program space. But what happens in a program when someone discloses, when maybe in a program you do have a crisis or you are feeling very unregulated? I would love to hear your thoughts on what to do during a facilitation moment and what you do. And I'll pass it to Victoria, actually, to start us off for this one.
We touched a little bit about this last time at the last session, and in an ideal world where we have support, then we can allocate if somebody, I mean, ideally, we would have already addressed that if anything comes up in a conversation or we hear or somebody's sharing and it activates and anybody needs to step away, needs to step out of the room, then person A, B, or C can accompany. Like in an ideal world, we've allocated somebody and we've spoken about what to do in the case of. But really is staying calm. I think the calmness of one of the facilitators is really important. Staying grounded, validating the person. If somebody is really dysregulated where they need to be removed from the room, then accompanying that, facilitating that, and having conversations before the group starts at the and talking about sort of like normalizing when big emotions can happen, normalizing and understanding that it's part of the process, it's part of the experience, and also to share some mediation in terms of like self-regulation, like only share, and this is something that I bring to the table all the time, is that only share what you're comfortable sharing. Sometimes we're surprised with our own emotions. Sometimes we see, I don't know, an image of a yellow duck, and then it reminds us of something from the past, and then we are like this overflowing of emotions, and that's okay. But we can also choose what to share and what not to share. And we don't have to share everything, and we don't have to share in great details if we don't want to, if we're not ready, if we don't. So normalizing to share only what we're comfortable with. And then also normalizing that when big emotions come up, there is a system in the room to take care of the individual. That if somebody starts crying, doesn't mean we all need to go rushing to that person and give them a hug, because that's could be the last thing they need or they desire. So to also have a bit of a check-in conversation of like, what do we all need? Let's think about it. What do we need personally if big emotions, or if we start crying, how do we want others to respond? So sort of like expecting trauma to surface, and having a chat, having a check-in, whether it's at the beginning of the session, throughout the session, repeating it each time we gather, understanding that our bodies and our minds are complex, and we don't always know when it's going to unravel. We don't always know when it's going to flourish. And so being ready and expecting it, and staying calm as calm as we can for the facilitators, right? We can't, in those moments, we can't always like heal the trauma in that moment, but we can hold space, and we can again go back to the field of expressive arts therapy. We can all respond to a story. We can all take a moment and breathe and draw, and how to like have a moment of reflection and share that back with the participant, offer those gifts, as we call it in expressive arts therapy. Yeah, I'll pass
Thank
it on.
you. Yes, yes. No, thank you. The phrase that kept popping up in my mind as you were speaking is expect the unexpected and the holding of each other. And you're so right. When we are also experiencing emotions, it's also an opportunity to not ignore them and to lead by example as well. And I know that actually in every single one of your heal groups, we had sessions where almost everyone was crying, but it was a moment of holding space for each other and then working through that. And I think, yeah, the next week after, the closeness and that bond was just so much stronger because of it. So I'm going to pass it to Afsane to respond to this one.
I think the question was the challenges.
Yeah, when you're like in the facilitation moment and something happens, a crisis, a
Right.
disclosure, what do you do?
Yeah, I guess working with gender-based violence survivors. I think, again, being aware of your boundaries can be challenged, right? As Victoria mentioned, and yourself, the kind of the calm self is very important. The non-anxious self, we need to really be aware of that, when we bring ourselves into spaces. But one of the things I think for me had been a struggle always, this inequity of when we hear stories of injustice and unfairness for these women who had experienced violence, how automatically, obviously, we react to that. There is anger, probably. There is some kind of reaction that how could one do this as a human being? How could one I guess hurt others? So that's something it's very hard to comprehend. So that is one thing that kind of it's a larger, I guess, systemic issue that hopefully will be addressed at some point. But that's one thing for me is how can one harm others? So something to work on, constantly reminding myself, yes, we do help, we empower these women, this population, but at the same time, how the system can also change for better.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that emotion, many emotions underneath that anger piece around broken systems or systems that don't actually support or have compassion for the folks that we work with. And it comes up a lot, right? We're not only doing individual work, but we are doing systems work, and making that connection is hard. I mean, making that connection, we see it, but I meant it's hard to make that change at the macro level, right? Yeah. Yeah, Madge.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about like some of the really challenging moments that I throughout both heal and beyond heal in my past experience with other types of groups, but um it's always been, and I think also in terms of for the series that the expressive art series that we did, there were, unfortunately, I think there was at least one, maybe two people who came for a couple sessions and then did not continue. And to me, I mean, that's a big challenge. And I think to me, that's always about their resourcing, right? Like, because it's always issues around employment, it's around housing, it's around those things. And sometimes when we have those moments of crisis or a big emotion in a group, there are other things that are again in terms of like resources or needs that are not getting met that are contributing to also that kind of expression or that kind of a crisis or challenge to happen. So I guess I noticed that the folks who like continued or were able to move through difficult emotion or express them and return and feel that closeness and intimacy were folks who were resourced in those ways, right? Like who are like, yeah, I'm meeting up with friends after this too, or I'm, doing this training for employment and I feel really good about it. Like there are other things in place that also allows them. Versus others who might not be able to let's say continue and are like forced systemically, as Afsan is saying, to kind of like withdraw or pause. So I do want to add that piece to it, the more like pragmatic, practical piece to that. And then I would emphasize also what Victoria was saying around naturalizing big expressions, messy expressions, wild expressions in the space, and really allowing that also with the boundaries of like knowing, okay, is this a bit, how are other participants feeling? Is this a bit too far, right? Like assessing, like we, again, these things from the first question of like, you do have to just be in those spaces and experience those things to be able to figure out when is the time to step in and maybe say, actually, we're gonna stop here and change this, or to just like allow it and move through it, right? Like these things are learned through that experience. But to just again, there's no, I think these things are experiential. Like we do have to live through them. We do have to experience them to learn from them. And it's not, I wish we could be like, here's like step by step, do this, but like no, you're just gonna have to go through it and then learn it. And every group is different, right? Like what might work for one group might be completely off for another group. Again, the cultural piece too. So again, the readiness piece. So um, yeah, I hope that's kind of helpful.
That was super helpful. And thank you for bringing to that conversation of holistic idea of holding people, that so many people who came to the program wasn't just for domestic violence and learning about that, but they were struggling with family, being a caregiver, housing, food insecurity, education, and so many of those things were coming up. So yes, you are so spot on around being able to, it just reminds me, when we start the program, having those care systems in place for all of those other intersectoral things that people are going through so that we are ready with those referrals and that we have a response when people disclose some of those connected pieces around. And yeah, does anyone else want to add to what Madge is talking about? Okay, okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I think we've spoken about many things, how to support each other as facilitators, how to also understand, individual practice all the way to, ideas of macro practice, how organizations can put in place concrete things that can help us outside of programs and also inside of programs. And yeah, it's exciting to hear that facilitators are interested in kind of that meso macro piece of program implementation, because sometimes we can be so immersed in our implementation of programs that we forget to, address those other parts. And I think that's where that team-based approach comes into play, is having allies to our facilitators, realizing they cannot, do all of this themselves. You cannot go upstream, but working with them to build that evidence, to ask them those questions. And I know, with the HEAL project, we did a lot of, in the beginning, going back to that safety protocol. How are we establishing unique and tailored safety protocols within our teams? That yes, organizations do have policies in place around safety, but as a team, what do we decide on around responding to participants, responding to ourselves when we are going through dysregulation? And so I think those conversations, as we've mentioned in many of our previous webinar sessions, the preparation piece is so foundational to any of these pieces when we are thinking about program implementation. That thoughtfulness and intentionality really needs to be there at the very beginning in order for those, spontaneous things to happen throughout those many weeks. All right, so we still have a couple minutes here. I'm just gonna allow a pause if anyone wants to add anything, but a question I am curious about, which you can respond to, is, sometimes we work with artists that have never worked in healthcare or settlement environments, right? We hire community artists or licensed art therapists, etc. And so as artists, if you were to dream the what if question, what would be the ideal scenario when an organization, a settlement or healthcare agency onboards you? What is something that you would love to see happen? So I'll let you think, because I know I'm just spontaneously asking this question. But yes, what is it that you would love to see for artists to be welcomed into this healthcare or settlement system, or even gender-based violence sector?
Maybe something to do with the spaces that we're working in. The group that I facilitated, I mean, we did great. There was like a big table, and then we were able to go outside. But it still felt a bit rigid, or I still felt a bit cold in the sense that it was a boardroom. And we had to like stand up and do anything with movement. We had to do it at the end and kind of move a table. And so maybe if the agency doesn't have the physical space, partnering up with a space that does have, that's like where there's color, where there's space, where we can put paper on the walls. It's so satisfying to do expressive arts therapy where we can be really big with markers and not just on the table. Yeah, we will adapt and we will create art whatever space is given to us. But if we could dream, and it's like, oh, it'd be amazing to work in spaces where there's physical space to move and where there's wall space to put up paper and things on the wall.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. Yeah,
And be messy.
Be messy.
Yeah, both be messy, big spaces, lots of light and walls to put stuff up on, and um, yeah, like and like all the. I think I was surprised, Kristen. You did such a good job with collecting art material. Like I was.
Yeah.
That was that I don't think I experienced that with every place I've worked at. So, definitely recommend following the lead of Kristen and like
Yes,
creating an
yes, I echo
art
that.
inventory of like even like musical instruments and everything. So yeah, that's wonderful to like to play with and dig into and yeah.
The dance ribbons. Oh.
Even now, I'm like thinking of like, oh, what if we put all those art resources in one area and we just let the participants be like, go see what's there and then pull it out and explore and just the messiness part. Like that's what it's about. It's not necessarily like going in and be like, we have this and we have this and we only are working. It's just like just put it all out and let everybody, go play with it and see what's there. I think, yeah.
Yes, and I think it was such a joy building up a arts inventory, right? Because materials are so important. I mean, yes, we can improvise and use many things, but I do, yes, agree with you that when you have the resources and actual materials, we can play and yeah, imagine things beyond markers and pencil crayons. There's so much artistic material that we can use, and that's also very culturally relevant, right? If you don't have dance ribbons, use scarves that are really, um, embedded in a lot of cultures. So that's a very great point. All right, Afsane, did you want to add anything before I end
Uh,
off?
I just want to especially we started, with burnout and compassion fatigue and all that. I also want to say how, as we also grow to, we have compassion growth with our work. So this resilience, we build, and as we watch our clients build resilience, so there's such pleasure driven from this work. So which is so important to always keep in mind that our work makes an impact, and how clients who come to us, they're not defined by their traumas. Uh, they are very resourceful. They can um, they can get up and be. And this is the opportunity that the Heal provided for participants.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for that final note. So, as always, we will be sending out a follow-up email with some resources that we talked about today. Marco has also put that in the chat. And I hope you join us next week for our final Creative Care webinar session. And thank you to everyone in this panel for sharing, yeah, vulnerably about your experiences as facilitators. So until next time, have yourself a very good day and drink lots of water. Bye, everyone.
You, bye.
Bye.